Is there any pressure on Kalen DeBoer to make the playoff in his first year with Alabama? That is Luke Robinson of Locked On Crimson Tide joining me here on the show. Let's start right there, Luke. A win total of 9.5. A coach who has won quickly everywhere he has ever been in his career. Taken over for Nick Saban year one. Got a returning talented quarterback in Jalen Milroe. Does that line up for a playoff or bust season in the 12-team era?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, we Alabama fans can be a little unreasonable at times, and Nick Saban only made us that much more so. But there are a lot of returning pieces, and there's some incoming pieces that are very good. You know, Keon Sabb and Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams. We got some dudes coming in, and Jalen Milroe is a really good quarterback. I think he solidified himself as the starter. And some people, that may sound crazy, but I think there's still some Alabama fans that, may want some Ty Simpson action. But regardless, I feel like 9.5 is a great number set by Vegas. And the only reason I feel that way, if there was one game that was switched, like let's say Alabama played, I don't know, Mississippi State instead of Oklahoma or LSU or something, I would say definitely take the over. But when you have a schedule that features at Wisconsin, Georgia at home, at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma, I mean, those are 5 challenging games, not to even mention playing Missouri at home, who some people think will be top 10, if not top 5, playing Auburn at home. Now, I know Alabama's done pretty well against Auburn at home, but this is the Iron Bowl. So, yeah, I think 9.5 is a good number. I'm not going to panic one way or the other. I think if Alabama gets to 9-3, they're in. I really believe that with all my heart because the schedule is so arduous. I know, say what you want, but I really believe they would be. I mean, you can't tell me you look at that schedule and there's another team out there that's 10-2, or God forbid, even a team that played in a conference that's not so good and goes 11-1, but played nobody in the out of conference. I don't know. I feel like Alabama would get the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I think that's entirely possible, and it's one of the maybe the most intriguing element of the 12-team playoff this year is how the committee treats on the back end of at-large playoff selections 9-3 and 10-2 SEC versus ACC or Big 12 teams. Josh Pate says all the time, you are not where your record says you are. I subscribe to that notion personally because college football scheduling is broken. Not all schedules are created equal. This entire sport is completely unequal. It has been for an incredibly long time, and that's not going anywhere. And Bama does have kind of a sneaky tough schedule. Like, they go out Wisconsin week 3. I don't think they're going to have much of a problem there. They start SEC play with Georgia. They've got to go at Tennessee, where they lost in 2022. Missouri is good. I don't know if Bama is going to lose that game at home, but they have to go at LSU. That's a game you can lose. At Oklahoma, you can't rule that out in the Iron Bowl. Anything can happen in there, even in Tuscaloosa, though, as you mentioned, less so. I just wonder if you start to run out of spots. Like, in theory, Luke, I think you're right. That a 9-3 Alabama team is probably ranked, well, they're ranked 11th in the country. But you have to remember, there are going to be bid stealers out there, particularly from the group of 5. Like
there'll be one bid stealer.
Yeah.
Let's call a spade a spade. They're not getting 2 group of 5s in there, and they shouldn't.
No. They absolutely should not. I mean, I don't think there should be an auto bid for anybody anywhere. I think every auto bid from now until the end of time is completely ridiculous. It is an absurd premise. But the reason I say there could be multiple bid stealers is outside of the group of 5. Let's take the Big 12, for instance. What if Utah goes 11-1 and, I don't know, Kansas State goes 9-3, plays them in the Big 12 championship game and wins? Kansas State at 10-3, I'm going to get sick just saying this, but Kansas State at 10-3 now has a bye in the playoff, and Utah is sitting there at 11-2. That's where a bid stealing move, like at Kansas State in 2022, when they beat TCU, that would have been a bid stealing move. And that's where I think the 9-3 SEC conversation gets really, really dicey, even though on the surface, I agree with you, with that schedule, it should be in.
I'm going to tell you something. Again, call me a homer if you want to. That's fine. 11-2 Utah is, I think you said Utah is your.
Yeah, like just hypothetically.
Utah does not get in over 9-3 Alabama. Now, that's assuming that Alabama's losses aren't to like Vanderbilt and something like that. But even if they are, that means they've beaten one of these other teams we're talking about. So, especially, look, I feel like Alabama's playoff fate may be sealed pretty early. Or not sealed, but they can say that they're in the playoffs pretty early, barring catastrophe and injuries, if they beat Georgia at home. If they beat Georgia at home, all of a sudden you're like, okay, we can sort of put Alabama in. I mean, and some people may think that's not fair, but Utah's not playing Georgia at home and at to LSU at Tennessee. They're not doing it, and so I'm not hating on Utah. I get it. And last time Alabama and Utah played, they beat our brains in. So I'll give them credit. But you said something earlier that I wanted to expound on. You said college football scheduling is broken. I don't necessarily think it's broken because there's no way to do it right. I mean, look, if you look at the NFL, sometimes one team or one division gets to play in a vastly inferior division, when they get matched up. And it sort of leads itself to like, okay, those are a couple of easy wins. Or if you're in the AFC East, if you like the Patriots were forever, and they are still are, and they were playing teams like Buffalo, who wasn't good, Miami, who wasn't good, and the Jets, who weren't good during their big run. They get 2 games against those teams every time. And so every schedule has a quirk. And for the SEC, the quirk is everybody that you play, with the glaring exception of Vanderbilt, can beat you. Now, Mississippi State has less of a chance, but they can beat you. Ole Miss they've won 10 games the last 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, everybody's getting better. So I think the SEC gets that benefit of the doubt. And I'm not just trying to say that for Alabama. I feel like if Georgia goes 9-3, I mean, shoot, and that's not crazy to talk about. When they have to travel to Bama, to Texas, to Ole Miss, they've got to play Clemson at a neutral site. They've got to play, Auburn at home. Auburn hadn't beaten them since Moby Dick was a minnow down there, but that's okay. I think you hadn't heard that one before, have you?
No, that was a new one for me. That was good. That was really good.
With us Southerners, we'll give you some stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that the SEC is going to get the benefit of the doubt, especially the bigger brands this year, because Georgia and Alabama do play each other. And I think that's going to help both of them on the back end, assuming, again, that neither Bama nor Georgia blows the other one out.
September 28th at Tuscaloosa is going to be fascinating. And by the way, I'm as guilty of this as anyone in the college football content creation podcast media space. Vanderbilt catches a lot of strays, man. They just are all of a sudden walking down the street and then boom, a right hook out of nowhere, and you're like, what did I do? All I did was exist. But real quick to bring this back to Kalen DeBoer for a moment. Let's say Alabama goes 9-3, which is entirely possible. I don't know if I'm going to predict that, but let's say they go 9-3 and they don't make the playoff. How is that received amongst Alabama fans?
I think initially the hate would be directed towards the College Football Playoff Committee. I think that Kalen DeBoer has already won everybody over. I think that if Kalen DeBoer had not, if recruiting wasn't going as well as it is, if he hadn't handled this whole situation so incredibly graciously, do you know how hard it is to put your ego aside and come here and be like, I'm going to just sort of phase Saban out and phase myself in. It's very difficult for any head coach. I sat at a poker table the other night with a former D1 assistant coach, and he and I were talking. He was like, you don't know about the egos of all these guys. They're through the roof. And so it's to come in and be like, all right, I'm not going to – Kalen DeBoer hadn't like taken over the scene. You hear about him, but he's not in the daily news like Nick Saban, and he's not jealous about that apparently. And I think that has won everybody over. What it's done is given Alabama fans appropriate time to mourn the coaching loss of Nick Saban, and also it's made him very, very a likable guy. And he's also delegated all this power, which people respect because it's the opposite of what Saban did.
Luke Robinson, locked on Crimson Tide, bringing the heat and the fantastic metaphors as always. Luke, appreciate the time.
Appreciate you, bud.